Greetings, and welcome to the Multimedia Chronicles. One thing we've been seeing a lot of over the past few years, actually almost the past 10 years now that I think about it, is movies based on comic books. Now, of course, the two that sort of really kicked off this new mega genre of movies was, I think, Spider-Man and the X-Men. Those were the two that really got it noticed as a marketable, profitable genre by the powers that be in Hollywood. And since then, pretty much every year we've seen a new batch of comic book movies coming out. I mean, we've had the Spider-Man trilogy, the X-Men trilogy, we've had Man-Thing, the Punisher, the Fantastic Four, now we've got Iron Man, we've had the Hulk, we've got a new Hulk movie coming out, and Hellboy. Yeah, anyway, the list goes on and on and on, and there's more coming out all the time, there's more announced all the time. Speaking of X-Men, there's a Wolverine movie in the works, there's a Magneto movie in the works, and apparently a fourth X-Men movie as well. So, yeah, interesting stuff. So what am I going to talk about this time? Well, I've been a comic book fan pretty much as long as I've been a movie fan. So for me, it's always been very exciting to hear about movie projects coming out based on old comic books, especially if it's a comic book that I personally enjoyed back in my comic book collecting days. One of those series that I thoroughly enjoyed in my youth, especially in the 80s, I think it was really the heyday for the series. It was written by Chris Claremont. Damn, he could write a good story. Was the X-Men. Yes, I loved the X-Men comics, and I collected them religiously for a very long time, until they started getting off into all these different spin-off series and stuff, and then it just became too much for my rather meager allowance-based budget to support. So basically, I collected the original Uncanny X-Men series for a few years, and then I collected X-Factor for about a year, and, you know, the odd spin-off here and there. But for the most part, I stuck with the main series. So, for a long time, I, as an X-Men fan, was dying to see some form of X-Men movie. And, well, the closest we got for a long time was in the late 80s. There was a pilot put out for a proposed X-Men animated series. A little bit of information about that most people don't know. The same year, there was an animated series based on RoboCop, which originally was slated to be 13 episodes long. In the end, they actually only did 12 episodes of RoboCop, and instead took the budget that had been set aside for the 13th episode and used it to produce the X-Men pilot episode. Pretty cool, eh? Both were Marvel productions, so I guess they figured, hey, we could use this extra money from the, we could just basically make RoboCop one episode shorter, do our X-Men pilot, give the fans what they want, see if it'll get picked up, and hopefully do an X-Men animated series. Well, at the time it didn't happen, but a few years later, in the early 90s, I think it was 93 or 92, I think it was 92 actually, or 93, anyway, somewhere around there, there was, of course, the X-Men animated series, which ran for 5 seasons for a grand total of 76 episodes. And it was extraordinarily well done and vastly entertaining. And I have some things to say about it, which I'm going to save for another rant. So finally, in, I believe it was 1999, we got the first X-Men movie. This, of course, is X-Men 1.5, which is the Super Duper Uber Deluxe Edition. The only edition to get as far as I'm concerned. And then a couple years later, we had X-Men 2, X-Men United. Now you may notice, this section of my shelf, by the way, is stuff based on comic books. So as you can see, there's been quite a lot over the years. This isn't even close to everything. But you'll notice, in my little X-Men section here, I only have the first 2. Why is that, you're probably wondering? Well, let me say this. I loved the first two X-Men movies. I didn't have a big problem with the fact that they, took some liberties with the origin stories of the characters, and they changed some stuff. I can understand why they made the changes they did. They wanted to make it accessible to new audiences as well as being faithful enough to the material that the longtime fans, like myself, would be pleased with it. And for the most part, excuse me, I'm just getting over a cold. For the most part, I think they got the balance pretty darn good. So, big tip of the hat to Bryan Singer for doing such a great job with the first two. Then we come to the third one. Bryan Singer is off busy directing Superman Returns and proving to the world that he is only in fact a two-hit wonder when it comes to comic book movies. But that's another story for another time. So, he pulls a Tim Burton Batman on us, and rather than direct the third one himself and put it off a little bit, he goes off to do a Superman movie and hands the reins over to another director. Why do I call that a Tim Burton Batman? Because Tim Burton did the same thing with the Batman movies back in the 80s and 90s. He directed the first two, was unable or unwilling to direct the third one, and handed the reins over to Joel Schumacher, who promptly proceeded to run the series into the ground and turn it into just one uber crap fest. Once again, another story for another time. So, Bryan Singer pulls a Tim Burton and hands the reins over to Brett Ratner? Let's look Brett Ratner up on imdb.com, shall we? And see what else this fellow has directed. There must be some reason why Bryan Singer thought that he would be perfect to direct the third X-Men movie. Well, looking at Brett Ratner's resume, we see the two most prominent films being Rush Hour 1 and 2. Yeah, that would be my first choice. Give the X-Men franchise over to an action comedy director. That makes sense. I don't care what anybody says. Yeah, Jackie Chan's great. Chris Tucker has his moments. But the Rush Hour movies are not even close to the same caliber as the first two X-Men movies. The first two X-Men movies had depth of character and depth of story. They were faithful to the source material, well, faithful enough that it wasn't offensive. And, the big thing about them that worked was it really felt like X-Men. You felt like these were the characters that you knew from the comic books. Even if they had been changed slightly for the movie, they still felt right, The characters were good, the stories were good, the whole bigger picture situation that they were involved with was good. It was all good. So why did they decide to change it so much with the third one? Okay, I'm kind of going all over the place here. I really need to sit down, put the camera down because it's getting frickin' heavy, and just go into this full-blown rant style. Here we go. You know what? There are so many freaking things wrong with this movie that I'm not going to put it into this video. I'm going to put it in the next video. So consider this video the background info, and the next video will be the full-blown rant about it. Okay? I'm going to put it up right away. Don't worry, there's going to be no waiting. So, go watch the next one. I'll wait for you.